Have you ever walked through a forest and felt like it knew who you were? Not because you'd been there before, not because anyone saw you, but because every branch, every patch of moss, every gust of wind seemed to turn its head and whisper your name. Some forests aren't dangerous because of wild animals or treacherous terrain. They're dangerous because they listen. And once you answer back, even with just a glance, the forest will never forget you. 1. Pilliga Forest. The wind knows your name. Pilliga Forest, located in northern New South Wales, stretches out like an endless blanket of thick, bushy trees. From above, it looks like a dense green sea, with no clear beginning and no visible end. But deep inside, it's another world, silent, stifling, and always damper than it should be. Tina, a long-haul truck driver, had a habit of pulling over near the old ranger station at Pilliga during her night shifts. There was no phone signal in this area, but a strange kind of quiet she'd grown used to, until one late night in June. No wind, no moon. Her headlights cut through the canopy, thickening the darkness rather than piercing it. She reclined her seat, closed her eyes, and heard footsteps. Not fast, not steady, as if someone were walking barefoot on dry leaves. She sat up, scanning the area through her windows. Nothing. But then, a sudden gust slipped through the cracked window, unnaturally cold, and she heard it. "Tina." The voice seemed to drop from the branches above, slow and brushing past her hair. She held her breath. Then, from her left ear, "Tina, don't leave." The voice didn't sound human, no breath behind it, more like wind, squeezed into syllables. She lunged into the driver's seat, fired up the engine, and hit the gas. Never looked back. But as she sped off, something flashed in her rearview mirror. Tall, slender, faceless, standing in the road with arms limp at its sides. Since that night, every time she stops near a forested stretch, her radio cuts to static, always at exactly 2:37 a.m. And once, when she played back dashcam footage, she heard her name, not once, but 3 times. 2. Otway Forest, the Faceless Watcher. Otway Forest lies off the edge of Victoria's Great Ocean Road. Tourists visit for the waterfalls, the towering ancient trees, and the cool, misty air. But if you step into the woods at dawn, while the fog still hangs thick among the branches, you'll feel it. You're not alone. Lily, a photography student, ventured into Otway alone to capture sunrise shots. She brought her camera, tripod, and a wide-angle lens. At precisely 4:50 a.m., she saw a faint glow deep in the woods, like a lantern, soft, golden, and moving. She assumed it was a camper and followed it, but every time she got close, the glow slipped further away. She began to feel lost. The fog grew denser, swallowing sound. Even her own footsteps disappeared. All she could hear was the brushing of her jacket against the air. Then she noticed. The trees were standing too close together. The space around her felt compressed. And through the milky haze ahead, she saw a figure, standing between 2 tree trunks. No head, no face, no shadow. Her camera trembled in her hands. She took a photo. Blank. Took another. Still nothing. On the 3rd try, an error flashed on the screen. Face not detected. She turned to leave. But the trail was gone. Only a wall of trees. Dense, sealed, damp, like the forest's own sweat. Hours later, the ranger team found her. Her camera's GPS log read, "In motion, speed 0.3 ms." Even though she had stood still, And on the memory card was a video she didn't record. The angle was low, shaky, filming the still forest. At the end, a soft female voice whispered, "Don't turn around." 3. Karri Forest. The laughter in the morning light. Karri Forest in Western Australia is home to some of the tallest trees in the country. Their pale trunks rise like vertebrae, upright against the shadowy floor. In the early hours, especially after rain, the air in the forest turns sweet. A strange sweetness, like honey mixed with damp earth. Those who've camped there overnight say that at 5 a.m. you'll hear laughter. Not near, not far, not loud, not quiet, just laughter. Floating through the trees, sometimes mingling with the wind, sometimes cutting through it like a bell. The Rowan family once camped near the forest's edge. At dawn, the mother woke, thinking her children were up playing. But when she opened the tent, both kids were still asleep. She looked around. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves. And then she heard a laugh. Her daughter's laugh, but twisted, stretched too long, and coming from above. She looked up. No one there. But the branches overhead were shaking, not from the wind. When they tried to leave, the car wouldn't start. The father checked under the hood and saw a line of small, dirt-smeared handprints across the hood, as if something or someone had crawled over it during the night. They called for roadside assistance. When the car finally started, the FM radio turned on by itself, not to any station, just a looped sound, a children's song, but played offbeat, like the person singing had never heard it before. Once the forest learns your name, it no longer wants you to find your way out. In the next part, you'll explore forests where time doesn't move straight. You follow a map, but never reach your destination. You think you're walking, but something is pulling you. You hear footsteps, but can't tell if you're hearing them or you're being followed. Ever chosen a forest path just because it was quiet? Remember this: those very paths are choosing who they let in. Have you ever walked through a forest and suddenly you're no longer sure if you're the one doing the walking? It's not that you're lost. It's that the path has moved. It's not that you're slow. It's that time outside of you has started flowing differently. The forest doesn't need to attack to scare you. It only needs to make you doubt your own senses. And once you start doubting, you're already deeper than you thought. 4. Lerderderg State Park. The Silent Loop. Lerderderg State Park lies in western Victoria. Not too vast, rarely crowded, but laced with steep gorges, crumbling cliffs, and winding trails that snake through low bushland. Evan and his group of 4 friends once hiked there in autumn. They picked a circular trail, roughly 10 kilometers. GPS working, map in hand, water bottles full, clear skies, nothing strange. Until they circled back to the same tree for the 3rd time. A charred, hollow trunk, leaning slightly, like it were bowing. At first, they thought it was a coincidence. But the 4th time, one of them stopped and carved into the bark 3 slashes and 1 crossing line. A personal mark. An hour and a half later, they saw the same tree again. But the mark was fainter. Impossible. It didn't make sense. They fell silent, checked their watches, batteries draining unusually fast. The temperature dropped, without wind, and the sounds of the forest, branches cracking, leaves rustling, no longer aligned with their movements. As if the forest was playing a scene, just half a second behind them. After 6 hours, they made it back to the parking lot. They thought it was over. But that night, reviewing the camera, the final photo of the marked tree showed a fifth person in the frame, back turned, wearing a long, dark coat. No one remembered seeing them. And when Evan extracted the GPS data, the tracking log showed a tight circle, repeating over and over within a 3-square-meter space. They thought they'd hiked 10 kilometers, but maybe the forest never let them get that far. 5. Daintree Rainforest, the forest that breathes with your voice. The Daintree Rainforest in Queensland is the oldest tropical rainforest on Earth. The trees here don't just grow, they reach, as if clinging to the air itself. The indigenous people hold a belief that few dare mock. Daintree can speak, but it doesn't use its own voice. It uses yours. A documentary crew, 6 members, arrived in Daintree to film wildlife. They brought drones, audio recorders, and a device designed to capture low-frequency sonic motion. At first, everything was normal, but by the second night, their drone began to act on its own. Commands were ignored, yet it kept flying. Footage from the drone showed a black forest, no one in sight, but the sound of footsteps was unmistakable. And halfway through the clip, a whisper, "Step back, step back." The voice sounded eerily like Mia, the lead cinematographer, but she wasn't there at the time. The next night, one crew member disappeared for 2 hours. When he returned, he remembered nothing. All he said was, "I heard myself, but I wasn't speaking." In one of the audio recordings that night, they found a soft, looping sound, only audible when amplified 300%. A long exhale, too long, as if lungs didn't need to pause. That exhale ended with a dry swallow, close to the mic. No one from the crew ever released that audio. But Mia, the one who kept the hard drive, left the project shortly after. And months later, she posted a single line on her blog. Daintree doesn't want to keep you. It just wants to say the things we're too afraid to remember. 6. Belanglo State Forest, someone else's shortcut. Belanglo State Forest, located in New South Wales, is infamous for past disappearances and dark history. But even if you set that aside, walking into Belanglo feels unlike entering any other forest. There are no birds, no wind, and the crunching leaves beneath your feet sound just slightly delayed, as if someone is walking right behind you, half a beat late. Daniel, a solo motorbike trekker, camped there one night. He pitched his tent, lit a fire, and turned in around 11 p.m. At 1:20 a.m., he woke to the sound of metal clinking, like chains dragging across stone. He sat up and switched on his flashlight. But the light dimmed, even though the batteries were full. Nothing appeared in the beam. But when he turned the flashlight off, he clearly heard someone breathing through a dry mouth. Not close, not far, just circling in the air. The next morning, as he packed, he found a folded slip of paper wedged beneath his tent. The paper was old, written in pencil, "Exit is east, but not for you." Daniel left the forest immediately, but ever since, he says, whenever he travels alone, he hears offbeat footsteps. And every time a storm is coming, his GPS glitches, redirecting him straight toward Belanglo. When the path starts leading you, you only doubt your direction. But when the wind starts saying your name, and you hear familiar voices in your dreams, you're not just in the forest anymore. You're inside the forest's memory. The next part will take you to places that forget nothing, where the wind still calls out the names of those who vanished, where you stand beneath the canopy and hear yourself, whispering something you never dared to say aloud. The forest doesn't need to hold you. It only needs to know who you are. Some forests don't need you to return, because for them, a name is enough to keep a soul. You think you've left, but then, months later, you hear your name being whispered in a crowded street. A voice both strange and familiar, so soft no one else hears it. But you know, it's the voice from the forest. Maybe you never really left. 7. Barrington Tops National Park. The wind speaks the names of the dead. Barrington Tops, nestled deep in the northern mountains of New South Wales, is a tangled, mist-heavy wilderness. The trees don't grow straight. They twist like broken bones, and the trails are so moss-covered they nearly vanish. Tom, a scout leader, brought a group of teens camping there. On the first night, once everyone was asleep, Tom stayed by the fire to keep watch. At 2:17 a.m., the flames suddenly dimmed, as if someone had sucked the air out of the forest. And then, in the chill breeze brushing his neck, Tom heard his own name, called in his mother's voice, his mother, who had died 5 years ago. The whisper came from behind him, soft as fog. "Tom, come home." He turned, no one there. But the entire campsite had fallen silent. No insects, no breathing, as if the whole forest had bowed its head to listen with him. The next morning, in one of the children's journals, they wrote, "Uncle Tom stayed up late talking to someone, but I didn't hear the other voice." 8. Mount Macedon Forest. The cry that never ends. Mount Macedon, north of Melbourne, is known for its ancient oak groves and nameless stone memorials. Dozens of headstones lie scattered along old trails long since closed. In 2016, a couple, June and Marcus, went hiking there. That afternoon, while eating lunch beneath a tree, they heard crying. Clear, steady, prolonged. It sounded like a young woman. Thinking someone was in trouble, they followed the sound. But the crying never grew louder. It floated with the wind, and each time they drew close, it slipped deeper into the trees. They reached a moss-covered headstone, and suddenly, the crying stopped. The stone bore no name, just a single carved slash, like a cut. They stood there, trying to make sense of it. Then Marcus's phone vibrated. An incoming call from his own number. He answered. 3 seconds of silence. Then, the same crying, but this time, closer, much closer, and it ended with a whisper. "Don't let anyone say my name again." That evening, they left the mountain. But every time it rains, June says she hears faint crying in her ears, echoing into her dreams. And Marcus, despite changing numbers, still receives nameless calls at 3 a.m. No one speaks, just soft breathing. And once, through static wind, "My name used to be." Then silence. 9. Tidbinbilla, Nature Reserve, the face missing from memory. Tidbinbilla, near Canberra, is a rare blend of wilderness and surveillance tech. But no camera can help when what you see doesn't exist in reality. A group of young tourists went camping, taking photos, laughing, and joking. That night, as they reviewed the pictures, one group photo showed a sixth person standing in the middle. Gray shirt, arms limp, long hair covering their face. No one recognized them. They assumed it was a glitch, but the photo's metadata showed movement. That person had shifted positions within the frame. Ellie, the girl who owned the camera, began to feel uneasy at night. Every time she opened a window, she heard faint footsteps down the hallway. But no one else was home. One night, she set up a recorder in her room as she slept. The next morning, The 7-hour recording mostly captured light sounds, snoring, faint shifting. But at 3:41 a.m., a whisper came through. "Stand, right there. I'm looking back." Later, when she checked that same photo again, she saw herself, standing in the woods, facing the camera. She had no memory of posing like that, no memory of the picture being taken. But in the photo, her eyes were open far too wide, and reflected in her pupils was another face. 10. Great Western Woodlands. The voice that sounds like yours. The Great Western Woodlands, spanning over 16 million hectares in Western Australia, is the largest intact temperate forest in the world, larger than the UK. No one knows what lies in its deepest parts. No signal, no roads, no maps. Only a handful of people have ventured far. One of them was Willem, a Dutch biologist. He recalled, the deeper he walked, the quieter the forest became. Not a natural quiet, but deliberate silence, as if every sound was being caught before it could escape. On the third night, he camped near a clearing where trees grew in a perfect circle. Around 2 a.m., he woke to a voice. Willem, a clear male voice, identical to his own. He stepped outside the tent. No light, no gear. Then he heard footsteps, light, gliding, circling him, but never coming closer. And then again, Willem, I'm still here. He ran. No compass, no direction. By morning, he found himself back at the forest's entrance, even though he believed he'd run the opposite way. When checking his field recorder, the final 2 minutes contained a distorted audio file. Technicians later confirmed it was a human voice, repeated 8 times. If I forget my name, the forest won't. Some forests don't keep your body. They only keep your name. A name whispered in the wind. A voice that echoes through your dreams. A silent figure appears in a photo you never took. When the forest calls to you in your own voice, you won't know anymore. If the sound is coming from the outside or rising from inside your head, and maybe in that moment, you'll finally understand. You didn't carry your name into the forest. The forest was waiting to give you a new one. Have you ever heard a voice in the forest that didn't belong to anyone? And if one night, as you sleep, you hear your own voice calling your name from far away, would you dare answer? Tell us your story and let us know. Where would you dare to walk into next?